remember when that song came out, and I believe every quartet that existed tried to sing it and or had it in some way included in their musical, whatever the word might be. But it was a good one, and we thank you for sharing that with us. This morning, the text comes from Matthew 14, just a few verses from there, but it's a story that, well, tests us. As so many of the gospel stories do, we don't have any problem with Jesus' teaching and that kind of thing, but when it comes to the miracles, some of them can really be a test for us, a challenge for us to accept. And this is one of them. This is probably one of the major ones. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, but I wanted to kind of head it off at the pass because we need to be prepared for the very last sentence in this particular parable or particular miracle. But the story is in Matthew 14. It's after John the Baptist has been murdered, has been beheaded, and Jesus, it says, the text says, when Jesus heard what had happened, talking about John, he withdrew by boat privately to a solitary place. And hearing of this, the crowds followed him on foot from the towns. This was an ongoing thing. It was everywhere he went. He drew crowds, and there was always this crowd following him. And there's one, I remember a sermon years ago. I don't remember who exactly preached it, but one of the things about that sermon was that question is why they followed him. And that was always an intriguing point in these crowds. Why did they follow him? And there's a lot of answers to that, but it says when Jesus landed and saw a large crowd, he had compassion on them and healed their sick. As evening approached, the disciples came to him and said, "This is a remote place, and it's already getting late. Send the crowds away so they can go to the villages and buy themselves some food." And Jesus replied, "They don't need to go away. You give them something to eat." "We have here," they said, 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. And Jesus said, "Bring them here to me." And he directed the people to sit down on the grass, and taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and looking up to heaven, he gave thanks and broke the loaves, and then he gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the people, and they all ate and were satisfied. And the disciples picked up 12 basketfuls of broken pieces that were left over, and the number of those who ate was about 5,000 men, besides women and children. I'm intrigued with these type of stories, with these Bible stories like this one. And the reason for it is because stories like this push our buttons. They test us. They challenge what we say we believe. Now, it tests us to see what we truly believe. We can say we believe the Bible, and then we'll come to something like this, and we'll put on brakes. Because it's pretty hard to believe. 5,000 men. Now, scholars tell us some of these that of our very well-known biblical scholars, commentators, say, well, if you do the math, 5,000 besides women and children is probably more in the neighborhood of 10 to 20,000. I don't know that. I mean, I just know the number 5,000. Maybe there was only one child there, or maybe two. I don't know. But the point is, that's a lot of people for 5 loaves and 2 fishes. It's a lot of people, and it's an almost impossible to believe event. In 1820, Thomas Jefferson finished constructing his take on the Bible, and he did it with a razor and some glue. He carefully cut from the pages of the New Testament every miracle and every supernatural element, and leaving nothing but what he called the morals and life of Jesus. All the supernatural is gone, all the miracles are gone, and what's left is what he could believe in. It's what he could handle. So while reading these stories, we may not whip out a literal razor and whittle away at the New Testament of what we do or don't believe, but we often subconsciously whittle away at these uncomfortable accounts of Jesus, committing them to the exuberance of the gospel writers. So we say something like, well, the reason why they told that story, it's not really a true story, but they borrowed it from each other and they told the story to make a point. It's kind of a object lesson. Not really something that we should take to heart. But whatever we decide to do with these stories, the problem is that once we hear the story, there's no way around it. We've heard it. And once we've heard it, we've heard it. Once we've heard it, we have to deal with it. We have to respond to it. That's one of the problems about religion, is that, or Christianity, I should say better, is that once we present it, we know it, we've heard it, and now we've got to deal with it. Whatever it says, we either got to say amen or humbug. We shout hallelujah or we shrug our shoulders in contempt. There's no middle ground. There's no safe space between belief and unbelief. And Jesus relayed that tension when he said something to the effect of, whoever is not with us is against us, and whoever does not gather with me scatters. Same thing. There's no gray area. It's either black or white. It's yes or no. It's belief or unbelief. And that's what happens when we hear the story. It presents to us something that we have to accept or reject, and there's no way around it. We have to do something with it. But I want you to understand that I get it. Stories like this push us to the edge of our ability to believe. It's like the story of the 2 parents just coming home from church one day. And they have a little boy, little Tommy, and he's sitting in the back in his car seat. And Mom turns around and puts her arm up on the back of the front seat, and she says to him, she says, "Buddy, what'd you learn in church this morning?" And little Tommy says, "Oh, wow," he just got all tore up. He said, "It was way cool, Mom." And she said, "Well, tell me about it." She said, "The teacher told us about a guy named Moses. And God spoke to Moses and said, 'Moses, I want you to go to Egypt, and I want you to get my people, and I want you to bring them out of slavery.'" And so that's what Moses did. He went to Egypt, and he told the king of Egypt that the Lord wants his people. And the king of Egypt let them go, and they went out into the desert, and they were leaving Egypt. But then the king changed his mind, and he said to his army, go get those people and bring them back. And so the army went after Moses to get the people, and then Moses came to the Red Sea, and he couldn't go forward, and there was the enemy behind him. And the mom said, well, Tommy, that is an incredible story. What happened? And little Tommy said, well, it was a mess because Moses was hemmed in. That's what the teacher said. And so he got on his walkie-talkie and he called the air support. In a few minutes, the F-15Es came in and started dropping bombs everywhere, and the A-10 Warthogs came in and they were strafing the desert. And while that was going on, holding the enemy back, the engineer group was building a pontoon over the Red Sea, so a pontoon bridge, so that they could escape. And Mom said, Tommy, that's a good story, but is that really what your teacher told you? He said, well, hanging his head down, no, not exactly, but Mom, if I told you what she told us, there ain't no way you'd believe it. That's the way it's true. When you hear these stories, it's just no way you think, well, how in the world is this true? This text is full of that. There's so much that we can pull out of this text. For example, did you know it was the only miracle that's recorded in all four Gospels? The only one. There's miracles in all the Gospels, but this is the only miracle that appears in all four: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. It's all there. It's the only one that's in all four of them. So you have to ask the question. It begs the question, why? What is so important about this particular one that the other ones didn't quite measure up? What is it about this miracle that is so important that all four decide that it needs to be recorded in their particular gospel? Jesus did a lot of miraculous things. And really and truly, the others were just as miraculous as this one. So why? Why this one? I did a little bit of thinking on this. I guess you could call it meditating, but I watch my meditating because sometimes when I'm meditating, I wind up sleeping. And so I did do a little thinking. And I think, do you think it was because of the crowds that found what Jesus was saying and doing so intriguing that they were willing to go unprepared, traipsing throughout the surrounding countryside, following him, because they somehow knew that whatever happened, he could handle it? Do you reckon that might be what it is? You know, it's a strong possibility. That could be why it appears in all four. Or is it Jesus' compassion? Maybe the writers are saying, you know, this is the best way I can communicate to you that Jesus was a compassionate Lord. Look what he does for all of these people and how concerned he is over their welfare. That works too. I mean, that's not a bad sermon. I mean, that would work out real well, especially when we find ourselves in the messes that we can find ourselves in. Or was it a lesson on discipleship? Maybe what happens is that the disciples are told to take what Jesus has just blessed, the 5 loaves and 2 fishes, and carry them to the people. So they're to participate in whatever God is doing. That's a good story. That's a good lesson. We participate in whatever God is doing, and we get involved, and it's the idea of, now thou go and do likewise. That works. That's a good sermon too. And it's a good way to look at this particular miracle. Or maybe it's the generosity and the unselfishness of that one little boy, because that's what John tells us. It's a little boy that has 5 loaves and 2 fishes, and he gives all of his lunch to Jesus. It's got nothing left. He just gives it all to Jesus, and he trusts Jesus to do whatever with it he needs to do. Now, maybe that's getting close to why these writers use this particular miracle. I think it's a good idea. I'm not because I thought about it, because I think it works. I think it works for the miracle. But I think there's one other thing that's a little bit closer or a little more intriguing. I don't know this for a fact, but I've already shown you that this thing is wide open to interpretation as to what it speaks to many different areas of life. What about the menu itself? 5 loaves and 2 fish. Now, that's insufficient for the situation at hand, right? I mean, it's not anywhere close to enough. 5 loaves and 2 fishes for 5,000 men, besides women and children, it ain't enough. And maybe that is what we ought to hear. It's not enough. Listen again to these disciples. Lord, it's late. And it's not only late, but there's a lot of people here, and all we've got is 5 loaves and 2 fishes. How are we going to feed them? They need to eat, and Jesus says, "Will you feed them?" And they said, "We got 5 loaves and 2 fishes. There's no way we could possibly do that." And so let them go into town. And Jesus says, "No, I said you feed them." And they say something to the effect, of course, it's not verbatim, but this is what the feeling that you get: "Lord, that ain't even close to enough. Lord, we have nothing here but 5 loaves and 2 fish. And what I want you to hear is that is the response of the ages when people feel overwhelmed by the world around them. How many times have we said in our own way, all I've got is 5 loaves and 2 fishes? Think about the single mom. I'm going to try to illustrate. She's working 3 jobs, trying to provide the basics for her children, just the basics. She don't want them to be the target of adolescent ridicule, so she pushes herself to her breaking point to provide the necessities. Her children have got enough of a challenge living in a broken home, and so she has to offer them as much stability as she can, and it takes every penny she can bring into the house just to survive. There are real people like that. All the time, at the end of her rope, there is this never-ending droning question, relentlessly deep in her spirit, that's crying out, "What are we to do? We have nothing but 5 loaves and 2 fish." What about the spouse who is desperately trying to mend an unraveling marriage? Marriage is falling apart. And she's grown weary of being the only partner who seems to care. The other partner don't seem to care whatsoever. She or he is working desperately at trying to save the marriage for the children or whatever reason, and she's got no help. He's got no help. She's at a breaking point. He's at his breaking point. And in the tone of their voice, their actions, you sense there's nothing here but 5 loaves and 2 fish. That's all. How about the teenager who in high school finds life so demanding on the campus that he's no longer able to cope? It's a real problem. High schools are not what they were. Syndicated advice column Ann Landers published a letter years ago from an adolescent in response to one sent by someone who had lived through the 30s or through the Depression. And what the letter basically was saying was that we don't quite understand the youth of our day because we had it hard. They got it easy. It was a lot tougher to grow up in the time of the Depression. The teens of our day have everything that they want, everything that they need. It's just easier. And so this particular teen wrote a letter in response to that writer. And here's the questions that it doesn't say he or she. Here's the questions that they ask. It said, let me ask your generation a few questions. Were your parents divorced? Almost every one of my friends comes from a broken home. Were you thinking about suicide when you were 12? Did you have an ulcer when you were 16? Did your best friend lose her virginity to a guy she went out with twice? You may have had to worry about VD, but did you have to worry about AIDS? Did your classmates carry guns and knives to school? How many kids in your class came to school regularly drunk, stoned, or high on drugs? Did any of your friends have their brains fried using PCP? What percentage of your graduating class also graduated from a drug and alcohol rehabilitation center before they graduated from high school? Did your school have armed security guards in the halls? Did you ever live in a neighborhood where the sound of gunfire at night was normal? You talk a lot about being dirt poor and having no money. Since when does money solve anything? The kids at school who have expensive cars and designer clothes are the most miserable at school. When I'm your age, I won't do much looking back. I'll just thank God that I survived. Somewhere in that young man's haunting questions, if you listened close enough, you heard his conclusion, Lord, our generation has nothing but 5 loaves and 2 fishes. Perhaps not even that. Our diet is like the psalmist who said, my tears have been my food day and night. So many people in so many different walks of life knows that. They've experienced it. They feel it. I expect if we stay here long enough, we all will, in some way or another, have those times. It might be the response of any of us offers when life seems overwhelming and we just know that our resources are not enough to deal with it. We have nothing here but 5 loaves and 2 fish. So what are we supposed to do? How are we going to survive this? Certainly that was the response of the disciples. When 5,000 men plus women and children followed Jesus into the wilderness, and they had come to listen to Christ's words, they wanted to hear what he had to say. They wanted to hear this illuminating message that would light or dispel the darkness, I would say, that was encamped all around it, engulfing them. And now the story says the hour had grown late and it's time for supper and they are hungry and Jesus says, you feed them. Is it just me, or does Jesus always seem to be asking more of us than we can give or that we have to offer? You ever felt like that? I do. I mean, when I study, a lot of times I get to a point where I'll ask the question, how am I supposed to do that? How am I supposed to live like that? How am I supposed to accomplish that? How did you get that far through this particular situation? Your situation is worse than mine. How can you say that? How can you say how much you love the Lord? Or how can you say this about that person in praise when that person has done to you what they have done to you? How do you get to the point to where you can do that? He calls us to love when hate seems to be much more appropriate. We'd much rather hate than we had to love. Or to forgive when revenge is the greatest desire, or to stand firm even though it means standing alone. We all know that standing alone is lonely. And those things are not easy to do. After all, we are not Jesus. We cannot call out and 10,000 angels are going to appear and keep us safe. 10,000 angels are not going to be present whenever the onslaught of those who disagree with us for our own moral bearing attack us. So many of our life experiences are faced with nothing but 5 loaves and 2 fish. Fortunately for the 12 and for us, the story doesn't end there, does it? This is where you know what a fulcrum is, I'm supposed. It's a pivot point. It's the thing that the seesaw is hooked to, where it works back and forth. Well, I'm going to give you now the fulcrum, what I think about, what I thought about as I was working my way through this. The story doesn't end with Jesus asking the seemingly impossible for disciples and then walking off into the wilderness to leave them there to deal with this themselves. He doesn't just throw them under the bus. He doesn't say, well, just feed them yourself or whatever, I'm going home. He said, you give them something to eat. They said, how? We don't have enough. And then Jesus says the crucial statement of the whole story. He said, bring them to me. That's it. There it is. Are you listening? Are you hearing what he's saying? This is the sentence that we dare not miss. Perhaps this is why all 4 gospel writers included this in their gospels. I don't know that. But there's no discounting the fact that without this sentence, the rest of the story leaves us hanging. We got no answer to it. We have absolutely no solution. All we have are 5 loaves and 2 fishes and nothing to do with them. We don't know what to do with them. We don't know how to handle the situation. We don't know what's going to happen next. We have the 5 loaves and 2 fishes, but what's next? And Jesus says, well, you got the answer. Just bring them to me. All these people have followed Jesus only to be left alone and hungry. No. Bring them to me. Those are the words that we want to hear. Those are the words that offers the solution. The message that someone greater than ourselves has our back. He looked up to heaven, he blessed and broke the loaves, gave it to the disciples, and the disciples gave it to the crowds, and all of them ate, and all of them were full, and there were 12 basketfuls left over. There's the good news for everyone facing something overwhelming. And you will eventually. I don't mean to put a damper on what I'm trying to say, but you will eventually. If you stay here, you will face something overwhelming. It's coming. My vocabulary is too small to form a sentence, we will say, that describes the pain. Or my finances won't support this. I don't know how I'm going to survive it. I don't know how I'm going to pay for it. The insurance company sent me a note and said that the procedure isn't covered. The doctor says I need it. The fog is too dense. I can't see my way through it. Do we have what it takes? The answer is no, we don't. We do not have what it takes. At best, in the face of overwhelming odds, what we have are 5 loaves and 2 fish. But we have a friend who whispers, "Bring them to me." That's the difference. I don't know how many times I have heard the sentence I'm about to share with you, especially sitting beside the bed of someone who is passing away or has passed away, and a member of that family looks at me and says, "I don't know how people survive without the Lord." I do not know how many times I've heard that. But I never hear anyone say it just because it's something to say at the moment. It's not a part of general conversation. It always is said at a moment that's the darkest and the hardest. It becomes a reality, this relationship with Christ that we have when we are under the gun, when life is tearing us apart limb by limb. We have a friend who whispers, "Bring them to me." Bring me your skills. Bring me your weaknesses, your strengths, your fears. Bring them to me, and I will make you adequate for the task at hand. In 1969, another song that was written by Jimmy Davis and Jack Campbell became one of those songs that was played by every quartet that could possibly get on a stage. And it went something like this. I can't take a heart that's broken and make it over again, but I know a man who can. Now, I can't take a soul that's sinful and make it whiter than snow, but I know a man who can. Some call him Savior, the Redeemer of all men. I call him Jesus, for he's my dearest friend. If you feel no one can help you and your life is out of hand, well, I know a man who can. I think that's what our story is telling us. What I have, what you have, what anyone who is hungry has. We have the invitation to call on someone who knows what to do. When life seems too big and I feel too small, someone is close who can do what I cannot. Someone who can right the wrongs and heal the hurts and love the unlovely and scale the mountain. Someone who can take my paltry little loaves and fishes and turn them into a feast. However little I may possess in terms of talent or resources, it doesn't matter. Your 5 loaves, your fishes, Jesus says to you, bring them to me. And through him, my little is enough.